Hello and welcome to what I just now have decided is going to be part 1 of a video that I'm splitting into 2 sections for my first and second viewings of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And I'm doing this in part just because I think it would be a fun, interesting exercise, having already gotten my second viewing tickets for this movie prior to having seen it the first time, if I sort of did 2 viewings, not necessarily back-to-back, but pretty close together, and let you know how my thoughts had changed from seeing it for the first time to seeing it for the second. And partially I'm doing this video just because this is the outfit that I wore for work today, and I want to immortalize it on camera because I think I look nice.
You know what? I've never seen you in all black. You need to do that one. That's a look. Sir, you are serving right now.
The outfit is Brianna approved! So, the thing about Wakanda Forever, and I'm not going to spend too long waxing philosophical about this movie, I find it kind of difficult to intellectualize about this one coming right out of it. It's a movie where I feel like I don't have as much emotional clarity about it as I have had with pretty much any other project in Phase 4. Name a movie or a show in the past 2 years of MCU, and my feelings, having finished it for the first time, are not necessarily the feelings that I have revisiting it, but are pretty concrete and pretty confident. And I can't really confidently speak to how I feel about things like themes or character arcs in Wakanda Forever. And anyone who's been watching this channel long enough knows that that's my whole bread and butter. So I'm really interested to see how I feel about the movie emotionally, knowing where it's going, and being able to piece together some more of what it's trying to say with these characters and with these grander ideas. Because right now, the one big thing that I pick up on is what has been the recurring theme, I feel, of Marvel Phase 4, which has been how much can you push a person before they aren't themselves anymore. And I think it's appropriate that that's a factor in this movie, given that it's the end of Phase 4, but it's not quite the thesis of the film, you know? And what that thesis is and how all of these characters and ideas and plot beats play into it is something that I think I need a lot more time to fully process and reflect on and come to any kind of earnest conclusion about. I say all of that as preface to the fact that this initial reaction is, I think, going to be a lot less glowing than most other critics. Because I can totally see why this movie is getting reacted to with such astounding glowing praise from certain areas, especially from people who have been kind of cold on Phase 4 up to now. Because this movie definitely does not have the issues that I've seen plaguing criticisms of other Phase 4 projects. It takes itself extremely seriously. It has a very clear sort of emotional intent and an emotional groundedness that not a lot of other Phase 4 projects have had. It's got a powerful, purposeful aesthetic and a clear directorial vision. And it doesn't feel at all compromised, I'll say that. I have issues that I'm about to get into with this movie, but none of it feels like it comes from a place of being compromised by the Marvel machine or anything like that. Really, the issue I think that I'm having with this viewing of this movie is pacing, and specifically how that relates to the editing. Because there are a shocking number of scenes throughout this movie where I get this, like, I'm taken out of it because I have this feeling of, if you'd only held on this moment for just another 2 or 3 seconds before you cut away to a completely different location, a completely different sort of feeling scene, then I would be a little bit more grounded in the tone of the movie. And I don't know, it feels kind of strange that the thing that holds this movie back is something that I feel like a lot of other MCU things almost get right as a matter of course, to the point where it's not something that you ever see get talked about, and I think the reason for that is it's one of those things that they've got down to a science. And I really feel like the only reason that it's an issue here at all, the only thing I could possibly think of as a motivation is maybe some self-consciousness on the part of whoever's in the edit bay regarding just how long the movie is. Because it is one of the longer ones, and I can agree with a lot of the reviews who say that the movie doesn't feel its length, but for me, I'm not sure how much of a positive that is. Because what I feel like I've just seen is a great movie that has diminished itself into being just a really good movie because it's in kind of a self-imposed rush to be finished. And it feels bad to have to say that. And honestly, just to leave the theater feeling like I'm being kind of dragged, because I did have a good time. I had a great time with this movie, and there are moments in it that really transcend. But I guess I just feel kind of like all of the positives I could list are the positives that people have already been talking about. The performances from Letitia, Wright, from Angela Basset, just really the performances all around. There's not a weak link in the cast. And again, that sense of grounded emotional maturity is really a boon in this movie's favor. But I don't know, I have this very strange reaction during this viewing where I'm aware that I'm watching something that I'm enjoying, but I'm also super conscious of the things about it that aren't working for me. And that includes the pacing, and it also sadly includes, I think, the action. As a whole, I feel like this is one of the weaker recent MCU movies as far as just the action spectacle side of it goes. I've also seen even some of the more positive reviews of this movie complain about a kind of C-plot that's going on throughout and that they say feels kind of pointless. And I get where they're coming from. It's not something that bothered me at all as I was watching, though knowing where that plot eventually ends and where it goes, I'm interested to see if it lands better or worse, if it feels more or less superfluous on repeat viewings. Because right now, really thinking about it, it feels like the only purpose for that plot in the movie was to sort of maintain a sense of America's involvement in the proceedings, and I really don't know how much you needed that. But yeah, I don't know. This is why I'm pairing my initial reaction with what I hope is a more positive second viewing of the film. Because I feel like I'm betraying myself a little bit and doing this movie a massive disservice by emphasizing the negative so much, but it really is those aspects of it that are most on my mind coming out of it right now. And I feel like I'd be equally betraying myself if I didn't speak to that. So, yeah, see you in the next part, which should be starting right... Okay, so you know that version of me from a minute ago? Ignore him. Yes, I know that he was better dressed than I am and that he had better lighting than I do, but he didn't know what he was talking about. Because I just got back from my second viewing of Wakanda Forever, and when I tell you that basically every problem that I expressed in the front half of this video went up in smoke. Also, warning that this is going to be the section of the video where I talk freely about spoilers, so if that's a problem, then you should get the heck out of here. Like seriously, it's almost surreal. The pacing, the flow felt so much better and so much more natural. The score definitely stood out much more in a positive way now that I was really kind of paying attention to it. And the action, specifically any action beat that directly involved Namor, was just some of the coolest stuff that I've seen in a comic book movie in a while, and I can't believe that I was so sort of like unappreciative of those things throughout my first viewing. I really don't know what it is. I think part of it was just expectation, and sort of as I let the movie just kind of wash over me, and I feel like the hype was so big that my brain had kind of like gone into this overdrive of any remotely perceptible flaw, like ballooning it, so that I was kind of like overcompensating for the idea that I might be overhyping this movie in my head. But oddly, it's when I step back and sort of like step outside myself a little bit and look at the movie with a measured lens as a viewer, let's say, that's when all of the positives really hit me in full force. And I definitely think, again, the me of a few minutes ago should have done a lot more lip service to the performances in this movie. Because Letitia Wright as Shuri is the one who carries it naturally. Like, the movie is so laser focused on making sure that the viewer is in Shuri's headspace and is relating to her emotionally throughout the film. But beyond her and Angela Bassett, who I think are rightfully the ones who get the most praise from a lot of people coming out of this movie, Tenoch Huerta as Namor is just insanely brilliant. Just this really, really nuanced antagonist performance. I can't even call him a villain because he's such a nuanced character, and for me, he's the character that I am most excited to see more of. Like, whatever project it's confirmed that Namor is going to show up in next, that is the one that immediately has my biggest amount of hype, because Tenoch Huerta is freaking revelatory in this performance. He's brilliant. Lupita Nyong'o, who is, by the way, just... This movie is a reminder, if anything, of how inhumanly gorgeous that woman is. Lupita Nyong'o, amazing. Danai Gurira has to uncover a few more layers to Okoye, and there's a scene between her and Angela Bassett that I think is some of the best acting in the movie, and almost all of this movie is some of the best acting in the MCU, so that's saying a lot. Winston Duke is, I think, going to be the most unsung sort of MVP of this movie. Because M'Baku is both hilarious, as he was in the first film, with that remaining sort of offsetting of his humor and his like very honorable position and temperament as a leader of his people, and he has that all mixed in with this much more cogent, mature, gentler side of himself that comes out in a lot of scenes that he shares with Shuri. And I think of all the many dynamics that Shuri as a protagonist forms in this movie, the one between her and M'Baku is the one that I find most interesting, most endearing. And there's a lot of, I think, sort of, dismissal of the subplot that I mentioned in the earlier half of Martin Freeman as Agent Ross and Julia Louis-Dreyfus returning as Val. But I think I spoke to this. I find that subplot so thematically interesting, given how it plays into this movie's nature as kind of a more cynical, a little bit more wary story than how insanely idealistic and uplifting the first Black Panther ended up being. And I think you need that subplot and you need that eyes in for the audience as to the sort of goings on in America and the Western world and their current feelings toward Wakanda. And to give some, I think, due credit to the performances, Julia Louis-Dreyfus has always been entertaining in her short scenes as Val, but there is one line delivery in particular in this film that I thought to myself, like, oh, that's why they cast her. For a character who has been just kind of mysterious and, like I said, entertaining in small roles up to now, there's a bit in this movie where I think to myself that Valentina de Fontaine is genuinely chilling, and that sort of chill factor like comes out from her character and sort of applies to the entire Western world as it's portrayed in this movie, and it's such a pointed moment for her character and for the film's thematic commentary, like as far as politics goes, that moment alone makes that whole subplot and completely justifies it and her presence and his presence in this film. But yeah, all of the Namor-centric action really is just nuts in this movie, and the sequence with Lake Bell where we're sort of introduced to Namor and we're introduced to the telekinex, where this movie genuinely becomes a horror movie for that one sequence. That is a really, really well done bit. And just everything about the handling of Namor in this movie is freaking genius to me, in the same way that the handling of Killmonger was genius in the first film. because the movie makes so many deliberate choices with him structurally that, like, again, it's all about putting you in Shuri's headspace. I noticed on this viewing, there's a good 15, 20, maybe even more than 20-minute stretch of this film where Namor has just done something really terrible, and then he disappears because he's done this really awful thing that's impacted Shuri in this way. And Shuri, who had some empathy for him up to that point, totally loses that for the time being. And so I like that for that duration of the movie, like, the movie stops the audience from empathizing with him by never cutting back to him. Like, the viewer and Shuri is just left to stew in how they feel about him until they come face to face again. One of, like, several, I think, very deliberate, smart filmmaking choices throughout the movie for keeping us in Shuri's POV. The fade in to the Marvel logo is one of my favorite fade-ins that they've ever done. Like, that's not something that I think about or that you see a lot of people talk about, but the transition from the cold open of this movie into the Marvel Studios logo is such a pointed choice for, like, a frame to freeze our character in, transitioning into the body of the story. And it's such a deliberately held fade that it's just one of those filmmaking choices that, like, Ryan Coogler has made that, for as much as I love most of the other MCU movies, you don't see other directors making that sort of pointed, clear, vision-driven choice as far as the visuals of the filmmaking goes. And rolling it back to the characters, speaking of Killmonger, he's got his one scene in this movie, and it is just stunningly shot, stunningly written, stunningly performed. Like, I don't even know if the scene goes as long as a whole 3 minutes, but it is one of the many highlights of the movie just because of, again, what it's saying about his character and what it's saying about Shuri's character and the nature of the story that we find ourselves in now, and just how much this movie's story exists in the ripple effect of Killmonger's actions. And to round it out by talking about Riri Williams did not leave the strongest impression on me in the first viewing, but seeing it again, she is still not quite a character that I'm super excited to see more of in the way that I'm super excited to see more of, like, Kamala Khan or America Chavez or some of these other, like, characters who are younger and are going to be, like, the leads going forward that we're introducing throughout Phase 4. But I got a much more solid impression of who she is on a second watch, and how she has this kind of attitude, this sort of bravado that is very poorly hiding a lot of kind of rational fear and kind of nerves. I don't know, it's not the deepest thing, but it feels like a distinct characterization that I was picking up on more seeing it the second time. But yeah, now having ruminated on it and having a much better experience with it the second time, I think I can confidently say now, I like this one more than the first one. It is a top-tier MCU movie for me, probably, like, tied with The Batman as far as my favorite comic book project to come out of this year. And it's just, I'm glad I decided to do this video like this, because I feel like I would have kind of regretted letting the first half of this video be my entire impressions on this movie as far as what I put out to you guys. But I don't know, what did you think? Which of my two viewings do you lean more towards as far as this movie, if you've seen it? Let me know what you think. Like this video, please share it around, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the future.